Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, The Recipe for Social Value Success. We already have quite a few of you in the room, but we'll actually wait a minute before we finally really get started, because most people tend to join a couple of minutes afterwards. But welcome to all of you who actually got here on time. Really well done, and really good to see you all. There's an opportunity here for chat between all of you, but there's actually also a Q&A button. So if you want to put some questions to the people here for a Q&A session, please put them in the Q&A chat. I can see people joining still. Okay, let's make a start. So welcome everyone to this webinar, The Recipe for Social Value Success. My name is Cleo Folks. I'm Head of Investment Management Advisory here at Social Value Portal, which means I run the Real Estate Social Value Index. I also am a founder of Property Overview, a training and consultancy company that has been in existence for the last 6 years or so, and I've got a good 30 years and more in the property sector. And I've been there and done that. I've done a bit of everything. Worked for Kuwaiti Sovereign Wealth Fund for 9 years. I've set up and ran various indices, and I've done all different types of assets all over the world. And lots of different things in those 30 years. So what is this webinar about? So it's about how measuring, enhancing social value delivery is a key priority for those that want to invest for purpose as well as profit. And you'll soon find out there is no one size fits all solution. But over time, step by step, improvements are being made. The sector is actually getting more mature by the minute. And our expert practitioners will have navigated this path and will discuss their experiences, their struggles, their wins, and as well as the practicalities for the current real estate investment landscape. So please note that this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available to be watched on YouTube afterwards. Also, for your Q&A questions, please use the Q&A submission to the right, rather than just putting your questions in the chat function. So please use the quick Q&A submission tab, and you can also upvote certain questions. So after the presentations and a brief panel discussion, we will have time for a Q&A session. So please vote for the questions that you like most. So who do we have on today? So today, I'm the one chairing. So my name is Cleo Folks from Social Value Portal, Head of Investment Management Advisory, i.e. I run the Real Estate Social Value Index. We've got as a first speaker, Max Sharp, who is an investment management consultant who joined Social Value Portal a year ago to work on the Real Estate Social Value Index, which is a framework for in-use assets. This was after completing his MA at UCL in real estate and planning, and I'm sure he's very proud to have achieved the distinction. Prior to this, Max graduated from Swansea University in 2020, studying human geography. And by the way, I did so as well, but I didn't graduate in 2020. It was a bit earlier than that. Then we've got next Alison Hodkinson, who is Head of Sustainability in the UK for Unibail-Rodamco Westfield, and is a senior property management professional who's worked at URW since March 2013, and also as a general manager for the 182,000 square meter Westfield Stratford City Shopping Centre. She also looks after the asset day to day. Retail really is in her blood, as she was at House of Fraser for 3.5 years before that as general manager, and spent nearly 8 years at Selfridges. She also spent time at M&S and Clark Shoes. So Alison has taken up the responsibility to look after CSR and sustainability at Westfield, which she will tell us more about. The last speaker today will be Tim Cornford, who is Head of Asset Management at Alandi, with over 15 years worth of experience across the UK and Europe with private and public sector clients. In addition to his role as Head of Asset Management, Tim was also responsible for delivering the social impact strategy at Alandi. Before working at Alandi, Tim was partner at Lath Investments and head of retail and leisure at Addington Capital. Tim advised Stockton Borough Council on their strategy of purchasing both shopping centres in Stockton-on-Tees to reposition and transform their town centre. Tim, like Alison, is passionate about retail and making it sustainable and relevant to its communities. I'd like to hand over now to Max Sharp. Max, I hope you're ready.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire, and good morning to everyone as well. So I'm just going to run through a brief agenda, but first I'll introduce myself as well. So as Claire said, I'm Max Sharp. I'm a investment management consultant at Social Value Portal, and essentially my day-to-day role is dealing with property managers, asset managers, and investors to really understand their social value delivery, and then work on improvement plans for that social value delivery as well. So in terms of an agenda today, I'm going to define social value. So talking through what social value is to me and what Social Value Portal sees as social value. Following that, I'll talk about social value as a top-down process. So within real estate, we're looking at asset managers through to property managers and then suppliers through to tenants. And then I'll speak about the importance of effective property management and asset management with a nice diagram that I pulled together. And then I will also talk about the importance of intra-firm alignment. So where a firm is at multiple sites, ensuring that their social value delivery is consistent across those sites. And then I'll conclude by talking about innovation and look forwards a bit with regards to social value, and then talk about some useful materials that you can go away and digest. So to begin with, what is social value? I think it's an ample starting point for this discussion. So social value essentially forms the S piece within the ESG trifecta. It's historically been the most difficult pillar of ESG to solve. In many ways, it's what I see as at least an altruistic piece in the private sector. There's a lack of mandatory social value provision, especially compared to the public sector, where social value is actually included as a weighting within procurement. The majority of social value is actually delivered local to an asset, i.e. through things such as employment, but that's not always the case, but just in most cases. And put simply, social value is essentially what a company does above and beyond seeking a profit. And as I'll discuss later, this might come from policies at the top level. In real estate, this typically comes from investors and asset managers through to the supply chain and tenants. And just some examples of social value in real estate terms would be through things like hiring locally, contracting local suppliers, offering training opportunities, offering mental health support to employees, and so on. And additionally, a key aspect of social value to me is really delivering what a community is most requisite to a community through corporate activity. So, for example, if an asset is in an area of high alcohol abuse, engaging with charities that are specific to that point. So, potentially engaging with charities like Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll now just talk through social value as a top-down process, the way that I see it. So this slide essentially breaks down the way that I see social value and asset, working from the asset manager through to the tenants. Essentially, at an asset, the social value approach, policy and governance is dictated and guided in most cases by the asset management team, which is then translated through the property management team in the form of targets and guidance for the supply chain and tenant base of the asset. Therefore, asset managers typically have the most propensity to influence the type and amount of social value delivered, but the least propensity to actually drive that social value. The property manager is also influential in the social value delivery, as you'll see in the next slide. But typically, where property managers have strong relationships with suppliers and tenants, social value delivery is far more mature and more developed. So property managers can also be quite key to forming relationships between suppliers and tenants through things like event organisation and signposting of relevant organisations. And that's likely to be the most impactful way of delivering social value. in my experience as well, it's far easier for asset and property managers to influence social value approaches within their supply chains, as opposed to occupier base, as essentially suppliers are contracted by the asset and property managers, so are willing to make wholesale changes to their social value approach to ensure renewal of the contract. However, as you can see on the far right-hand side of this slide, generally tenants do employ the most people and typically deliver the most social value through this job provision, and all of the results and benefits that gives to society. And now I've just pulled together this chart as well, just to really reinforce the point of the linkage between strong governance and social value maturity. So in my day-to-day role, we conduct social value measurements and try to calculate the maturity of firms and assets in their social value delivery. And as such, I've selected 10 random sets of data. Each color represents a property manager and an asset and their scores on the social value maturity index. And hopefully from this chart, you can really begin to see how there's often bunching of those two data points. So where there is a mature property management team, the asset is mature, and where there is a less mature property management team, the asset is slightly more immature in its social value delivery. So yeah, this really tries to reinforce the point of having socially conscious and engaged property management when trying to boost your social value delivery. And again, another key theme that I've picked out from my experience in the space is the importance of intra-firm alignment. So often within a firm at separate locations, there is a bit of a disparity between their social value delivery. So, for example, two McDonald's franchises might have two completely different social value approaches. So an easy way to boost social value delivery would be to deliver at the higher level of social value achieved within the operations at that company, as clearly the structure is there for the social value to be delivered at the higher level. And ultimately, it's important for firms to remember that an organization's social value delivery and approach is a sum of each of their locations. So boosting social value delivery across a range of sites will essentially boost a firm's overall social value delivery and in turn result in a greater positive impact to society as a whole. And now for my final sort of informative slide, I'll talk through the importance of innovation in social value. So clearly social value is an emerging and on the whole immature market at the moment. It's kind of the reason why we're having this discussion now. And it's not a coincidence really that it's something that Alandi and Westfield have both done particularly well. And that's the reason again why they're here with us speaking through their approach to social value as sort of market leaders in the space. But as with most activities as well, collaboration really is key. So particularly engaging and collaborating with community groups in the local area to deliver impactful value for time and effort, and also bang for your buck, something that Westfield will speak about a bit more later. Partnerships are really, in my opinion, central to delivering social value, and there's plenty of groups and opportunities out there to engage with and deliver social value through. The most effective way of delivering social value definitely isn't or doesn't always have to be the most expensive. There is space for genuinely great ideas and collaboration, and that can lead to a great amount of delivery for a little amount of money. And again, in my opinion, social value is likely to carry on rising in popularity as it grows in relevance and demands continue to increase from investors who are seeking longer term returns and alignment with sustainability and social related objectives. So looking at social value to future-proof investments is kind of, in my opinion, likely to become a bit more of a key space in the market going forwards. But I also think it's really important for a firm to align with social value that really aligns with their mission and targets as an organization and their beliefs. So yeah, in my opinion, this is kind of the key areas for delivering social value in the current UK space. And just some follow-on materials as well, which Social Value Portal has provided. So if you really want to get to grips with a bit more of social value and understand the terminology in more detail, Social Value 101 is quite a good place to start. It's sort of an entry-level guide to social value terminology and understanding social value. And then for a bit more of an in-depth understanding of social value and really looking at what the essentials are for an effective strategy, social value success factors is your place to go. And Tom will put the links in the chat for these if you're interested in them. So yeah, that's my part of the presentation done. So thank you everyone for listening. My contact details are on the screen if you want to follow up with any questions. But yeah, thank you. And I'll pass over to Alison now, who's a great speaker.
Thanks, Max. Hello, everybody. I'm Alison Hodkinson. I head up sustainability for our UK business, but I also lead on social value for our global business. And for anybody that doesn't know who we are, we manage shopping centres across Europe and the US predominantly, 77 of those. But we also have offices and airports too. Thank you, Max. So I just wanted to talk to you today about our journey about social value, actually. And it really started for us with resilience. And it started back in 2014 when we had a major incident at our East London shopping centre in Stratford. It happened to be on Boxing Day, busiest day of the year. Upwards of 300,000 people we welcomed that day. And unbeknown to us, a group of young people had decided to organise a meetup within the centre. That started with 30 young people that soon grew to 100, that soon grew to 500, ultimately resulting in 2,000 young people all grouped together, hell-bent on causing havoc, actually. Whether they'd been locked up for Christmas, I do not know, but they were posturing, lots of fighting, and it really resulted in us having to close down part of the shopping centre, which was, loss of business, hugely detrimental from a PR perspective. Following this incident, it led us really to look at how we could become more resilient to any future incidents like that. And it took us down a path of the resilience of cities. And some of you may be familiar with the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities Forum. Indeed, London is part of that and has its own dedicated resilient officer. But it was heavily dominated really by security and crime. So terrorism, cybercrime, etc. Hugely important in communities and very needed. And in fact, we did do a huge piece of work on that. But what I was interested in finding out was why these young people, some of which lived in the local area, and indeed some of them actually worked in some of the retailers, felt that they could come to the centre and cause a havoc. Clearly, they didn't love us. And why was that? And that really took us down a journey of what we term community resilience. And community resilience really is different to the security resilience that perhaps you're familiar with. And it really looks to ensure that the community that you operate in or you're located in has the ability, I suppose, to prepare for hazards and to adapt to any changing conditions, but also to withstand and recover very quickly from any major shocks or incidences, but related to people. So what does that actually mean? Well, we were able to actually talk to some of these young people post the event as to why they did what they did and what caused it. And what they told us really was that what did Westfield offer to them? They lived in and around the area and they saw us as a very corporate beast in East London, surrounded by some of the most deprived boroughs in the country, but they did not understand what we did for them. Now, we were doing community work in the area, but clearly we were doing it in the wrong place and we absolutely weren't hitting the right people. So from that, we produced and went into a lot of detail, sort of a really strategic, well thought out, and called it the Community Resilience Action Plan. And there's two fundamental differences to the Community Resilience Action Plan. One, as Max has just alluded to, was about mapping out your key stakeholders. Who are the key stakeholders? Was it, in our world, was it customers? Was it retailers? Local authority? All of the above. But highlight those stakeholders that had strong potential for impact and partnership as opposed to low potential. So those stakeholders that we identified that had high potential for high impact was people like the local authority versus perhaps a university in the local area that had asked us for help, really couldn't give us the impact for the problems that we had. So mapping out the key stakeholders is fundamental. The second one was about identifying the community challenges in that area and not going on what you think the community challenges are, but really using solid data and solid evidence from your local authority and crucially the local charities and stakeholders in your area. That enabled us to develop a really solid community resilience action plan that we had some really great success on. But then more recently, I've been asked by investors in our joint ventures of how do you know it's working? How do you evidence that what you're doing is actually working? And that then led us to look at how we can report and measure on what we're doing. And actually, this is the problem. In the world of social value, it's sort of ambiguous. How do you show a metric that says that what you're doing is actually making a difference? So we contacted the social value portal, and from there and through talking to them and understanding it better, we have now developed our social value framework. Thanks, Max. And the social value framework is really taking the community resilience action plan and doing a much more detailed and focused approach, starting with looking at what the outcome is that you want to deliver. So in Newham, one of the biggest issues we've got is youth disenfranchisement. So young people that maybe come from broken homes or indeed in the care system, certainly what we would call NEET, so not in education, employment or training, that are causing issues within the shopping centre. So working with the local charities that work with these young people and really identifying what the outcome was that we wanted to deliver. So as a business, we've now got a social value framework. This is based on the TOMS model. For those of you not familiar, that stands for themes, outcomes and measures. There are 5 themes. We've chosen to go with 3. And the reason we've chosen to go with 3 is that it suits our business. And it's really crucial for us that we focus on what we can deliver within our business industry. So you see there up on the screen that we have 3 themes. One's for jobs and skills, one's for social inclusion, and one's for environment. And across our global portfolio, actually, each of the 72 centres that we manage and operate have a target. So for each centre, they have to, during the year, put programs in place that ensure that 40 people are enabled into work. And just to be clear, enabled means to support, train, or mentor that gives someone the better opportunity to enable them into employment. And also for social inclusion initiatives, so each centre has to put on initiatives working with their expert partner, whether that be a charity or a local business, that enables people to be positively impacted by that intervention. And that could be, something like a meet and greet for people that are lonely, for older people, which are one of our centres in the Czech Republic does very well. But also environment, because environment is, people don't always link environment with social value. But actually things that you can do within the centres that we operate actually offer a great deal of social value. So thank you, Max. What we've also learned, and I just thought I'd share with you, is how this is important to our business. And, our business success is fundamentally linked to the success of our social value programme. And why is that? Well, more and more now, evidence of social value generated is being asked for from planning authority or a mayoral support across our European business. If we want to do a new development or even an asset enhancement project, the question is now asked, what are you doing from a social value, social impact, community point of view? 10 years ago, that question wasn't asked, even 5 years ago. So it's super important that we have a really clear strategy that can outline what we're doing. And equally, the landscape within social value is incredibly broad and increasingly important to investors, to community, to tenants, consumers, employees, all of which frankly demand it. What are you doing, and evidence how you do it. And then also for us as a business, evolving how we tell our story, not just on sustainability, but what I like to term, sustainable social value. The word greenwashing you'll be familiar with, but even social washing. It's not enough just to say that you support a charity. This is about what you have done in a meaningful way that you can measure and evidence that what you're doing is actually having an impact in your local community. So to being proactive and very, very transparent. And then finally, just the sort of key success metrics, thanks, Max, that we've experienced on the journey. And Max touched on this earlier. We employ a lot of contractors to manage our shopping centres, so security, cleaning, etc. Extracting social value from your supply chain is low-hanging fruit. It is really, really simple to do if you approach it in the right way. So as a business, we have something called a responsible procurement charter. And this looks to set a common standard across all of our supply chain in what we as a business are trying to achieve. But beyond that, we also insert what we call a 12-point green clause. And this asks all of our contractors to ensure that first and foremost, they employ locally, that they take on a number of apprenticeships, that their team get volunteering days, all the things add up to social impact. And it's very much a partnership approach. It's taken us nearly 3 years to get to this point. You cannot go in and demand it from your supply chain. You have to work with them and actually go on the journey also with them, which has been very successful for us. Resource is important. We're blessed to have a dedicated social value lead in the UK. And to Max's point, that stakeholder engagement is fundamental to the success of social value that you deliver. And then, as I've alluded to, transparency. You cannot be transparent enough when you're talking about what you've delivered. For us, it's about being really clear on what we can deliver, hence the 3 themes, and being really transparent on what we will achieve and reporting it annually in a very transparent way. Thanks. Hand over to Tim.
Great. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. It's amazing how many comparisons there are between what Westfield is doing and what we are trying to do across our portfolio at Alandi. So just quickly to introduce myself and Alandi. So I'm Tim Cornford. I'm Head of Investment and Asset Management at Alandi. Over the last 3 years, I've been responsible for delivering our social impact objectives, working very closely with Social Value Portal, delivering a social value measurement program across a portfolio of 20 of our shopping centres. Alandi is an asset management and development management company. We invest in, transform and manage sustainable town centres for the public and private sector. Last year, we became the first asset management company in our sector to become B Corp certified, which we believe strongly ties in with our core values and our vision, which is trying to create the UK's most sustainable and inclusive communities. We've got a portfolio of 24 shopping centres and town centre assets, which we are currently implementing regeneration and investment strategies at. And I'm here today, like Alison, to talk about our social impact journey. So Max, first slide, please. So I believe that our journey started far before social impact became a phrase that we're all used to hearing today. In fact, I think it was actually one of the first things that we started doing at Alandi. We've always believed that improving places for people was the right thing to do, but didn't necessarily have that framework in which we can wrap it up in. We've also always felt that investing in the town centres that we work in is important for the people that it affects and the communities in which they live. And just because people are going and shopping in a tertiary town centre doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be shopping in an environment that isn't up to par with a Westfield, say. So we, like SVP, believe that ESG is a word of the past. It's similar to the many phrases that we've had historically: CSR, sustainability, and now ESG, all very much pointing towards governance as something to work towards and something to have as a page on your website, rather than social impact, which is all about action, all about making impact, and not just having that page on compliance, actually doing something. So we've been working closely with SVP over the last 3 years, as I said. This year, we've measured the social value across a portfolio of 20 assets, the value that was created in 2022. And we'll be doing the same again in January 24 for this current year. And I think the experience that we've probably had is quite different to that of Westfield. We've got a portfolio in total of 24 shopping centres with 6 different property management firms. Each of them have their own contractors or their own preferred contractors at each of those locations, and sometimes local contractors as well. So one of the key outcomes that we have is just the variance of the quality of governance within each of the firms, sort of layering on that point that Max alluded to earlier about the intra-firm differences and the intra-firm variances. You start to see that clearly no 2 shopping centres are the same, and no 2 town centres are the same, and therefore the difficulties that we have as an asset management firm in aligning all of that is pretty clear. But what it creates for us is a really clear opportunity to put frameworks in place that will help to deliver and collect that social value across all of the suppliers and occupiers at our centres, and then have obviously a much further reaching impact than that as well, from those contractors going off and working at different centres as well. Next slide, please, Max. So this first slide, I've decided to use the example of the Broadway Centre in Bradford. purely coincidence that it used to be a Westfield asset, I promise. It was previously owned by Westfield. We've taken on the ownership in the last 2 years. But the reason that I'm using it here as an example is that of the 20 shopping centres that we've measured, the Broadway Bradford is without a doubt the most energy efficient and newest centre that we manage. But the reason for it being interest to us is that, as you can see here, almost 40% of the total value created from that asset is through the cleaning and security contracts, which is all about jobs, all about the ways in which you manage people. So by putting frameworks in place to ensure that when that contract is renewed, we are ensuring that we're collecting that social value, as Alison just said, the low-hanging fruit, making sure that those frameworks are in place to collect that social value is something that we can easily do. Next slide, please, Max. So across the 20 assets that we measured, we've shown that we've got just over £52 million of social value that's been created and is going back into those communities. As you can see, like 97% of that is through people that are employed at the centres, and the value of the environmental related initiatives is just under 0.2%. Reason for sort of highlighting this is going back to that dread word ESG. Everyone has been very much focused on the E for so long, and really it's a tiny percentage of the impact that we can have as asset managers and property managers across the country, and the way that we can affect and collect social value across our schemes. So most of our outcomes and recommendations are therefore around governance and the frameworks that we can create that will allow the property managers, the centre management teams, the suppliers and the occupiers all to work within to collect and show the total value that they are providing at the centres. Some really simple examples of how those frameworks can be successful, and these all come from the recommendations that have come from the reports that Social Value Portal have created for us. Things like contractors wanting to participate in volunteering projects, wanting to donate to local charities, but not knowing how to reach those projects or those charities. And by putting very simple frameworks in place, you can start to show those people how they can make a difference in your local community. One of the other sort of repeated recommendations and probably a bit of a frustration, really easy to fix, is that most of the centres we've clearly got ample bike storage or the ability to create bike storage, but none of the occupiers have, or none of the suppliers either, have sustainable transport initiatives. And being able to put those sorts of practices in place really affects people's lives. If you know that you can ride your bike to work and it's not going to get nicked because it's kept in a safe place, it's going to deter you from using your car or using the bus or whatever, and it's just going to make the social value that you can create from that asset a lot stronger. So with some clear guidance and communication with the occupiers, we can easily make these impactful things and impactful changes. What this really means for us, next slide please, Max, sorry. So I think what this really means for us, and what I really want to try and emphasize at the end of my presentation is really the way in which we can make a change. So this goes back to the point that Max made about maturity. It's about putting frameworks in place so that we can improve the way in which we collect the data and the way in which we can provide ways for people to make those changes to actually deliver more impact at the assets. By putting frameworks in place and creating that opportunity for all suppliers and occupiers to take these learnings and implement them elsewhere. So I think the final point that I'm going to leave you with is that, in my opinion, the real recipe for delivering social value success just comes down to governance and measurement. We need governance in place to be able to collect the social value, but probably more importantly, we need the ability to be able to measure that social value. Without knowing and understanding what value is being created, we don't know what looks good and we don't know what improvements we can make. So we need to understand our impact to ensure that our efforts do more to deliver better places for people. Thank you. And there's a nice, beautiful place.
That was amazing, really interesting stories. Thank you all very much for your contributions. It's been really good to hear the various stories of your journey that you've been going on, and what you think is really the ingredient, the important ingredients for the recipe of social value success. I'd love to ask you a few questions. So first of all, do a bit of sort of a panel session before we move on to the Q&A. I've seen a few questions. Please, I would like to ask the audience to put their questions into the Q&A tab. I see a few questions, but we'd love some more. So there's lots of interesting discussions around all that you've done and the journey that you've gone on and what's part of the recipe of social value success. Can I ask you to actually talk a bit more about, is social value more than just volunteering and making donations to the local area? Who wants to go on that one? I know Max had volunteered. What's your opinion on, is there more than just volunteering and making donations?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've seen in my job as a social value sort of on the ground practitioner, I've seen a range of different ways of delivering social value. Obviously, there is quite popularly donations and volunteering, but there's other things like apprenticeships, provision of mental health facilities, healthcare, all the way through to at Westfield we saw delivering a green space for school kids to produce honey on, and I had that on my Weetabix for a few mornings. That's the one that sticks out for me.
Yeah, Alison, and what's your opinion on that, on sort of what kind of things you can do? And it's not just about making donations and volunteering.
No, I completely agree. I liken it really to sustainability and just buying carbon credits. That is no longer acceptable. You have to do meaningful things in the sustainability arena. So with social value, is meaningful, and I use that word a lot, meaningful. I'll go back to what I said in my presentation. First of all, you need to understand who your stakeholders are. Then you need to identify your local community issue. And the nature reserve that Max referred to there came about precisely for that in West London, the local authority said that the vast majority of the children that they were perhaps worried about lived in high-rise blocks of flats, etc., and did not have access to any green space. We just happened to have a piece of land that we couldn't really do anything with commercially, and they asked if we might look at doing something with it. So through a partnership with a brand that we work with, Timberland, actually, we developed it's a garden, really. It's an urban garden, and it's got insect hotels and beehives and green spaces and all the things you want kids to do instead of being on their phones, etc. And we open that up to local schools and manage it. And of course, we fund it. But the social impact of that is that children, believe it or not, don't even understand where carrots come from. So we allowed them to plant a veg bed and then come and harvest their carrots, which they've just done, actually. That may not sound like social impact and social value, but it is invaluable. And that's what I mean about meaningful, as opposed to just writing a check. It's understanding the local need and then delivering something that will have that social impact.
Okay, thank you. And I thought the next question that might be quite interesting to the people attending here, and I know that I've been asked it a few times. So why does it matter to make an impact on the area where the building sits? And by the way, it's also all about additionality of social value. So all the things you do over and above a normal course of business. But why does it matter to make an impact on the area where the asset is located? Who would like to take that one?
I can take that one. Oh no, go on Tim. I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, so I think it's a circular thing. The shopping centres in which we invest, they're based in local communities, and to be able to be creating social value for that community has a direct impact on your asset, and the happiness of the people in your local community is important to you. If you can have healthy and happy people coming and shopping in your schemes, then it's going to be a nicer place to be. And I think it's a catalyst, and they work towards both creating a better place for everyone to be shopping in and to be living in.
And not just shopping centres, I hope. It's also for other assets. Max, what have you seen in your year at Social Value Portal?
I mean, yeah, so we've worked on a range of assets, primarily retail, to be fair, as you can see from Alandi and Westfield's presence here. But we have also worked on build-to-rent assets, and we've also worked on a range of commercial assets as well. So the framework that we use for measuring social value maturity is really transferable, as long as the asset has a supply chain and at least, you know, a couple of commercial tenants. In most cases, although it doesn't necessarily always need to have commercial tenants.
And is most value from a corporate reporting perspective coming from being able to show in pounds and pence how much social value was delivered over and above the normal course of business in that year? Or is it maybe because it's easiest to report a financial number, as that's what people tend to engage with most? Who would like to take that one?
I can take that, and that's been a very real issue for me over the last 2 years, actually. That, you know, when you work in a organisation that's predominantly a financial business, you know, if you're going to invest any sort of money, a return on investment is expected, and how do you show that? So it's something that we've been grappling with over the last few years before we delivered the strategy. And actually, the way we went around that was, as I explained, you know, having a really solid strategy, but being really clear on what you're doing and how you're going to measure it. The social value portal and the TOMS framework enables you to do that. But now, for my investors and for the joint ventures that we work with across our portfolio, they understand the language of energy savings and carbon reduction, which is, to be fair, different from 5 years ago. But they're now just beginning to understand the language of social impact, and that impact, because we've got a framework and because we can measure it, they're beginning to understand it and then accepting it. And actually, for the first time last year, we included the social impact results into our annual business report. So it is a language that people are talking about, but it has to be strategic and it has to be measured.
Anyone else, or shall I move on to the next question? Okay, so have you found the magic formula? Everybody would love to hear that, to get everyone on board with social value. So we talk about asset manager, property manager, supplier, and occupiers. So how do you get everyone on board, or are we just literally at the start of the journey? Who would like to take that one?
I mean, I suppose that's the difficulty in social value, isn't it? Each magic formula is different depending on the asset and depending on you know, the policies that the company who owns the asset has in place. So that's why there's really no one size fits all approach to social value. And I'm sure some of the reasons why Alison and Tim have had difficulty with their with really understanding their social value maturity is it kind of ranges across all of the assets.
And I would add also that I think, you know, in the business I work in, we have property managers in our residential, etc. What I found is when you've gone to them with your strategy, this is what we do as a business for social value, social impact. You're setting the bar high, and that then makes them set their bar high. And they might have been thinking about doing some community work, but now they're talking the language of social impact and social value. So I think, you know, if you lead and have that strategy and be really clear on what it is you want to deliver, then your other stakeholders, whether that be property manager or indeed your supply chain, will want to work with you and reach the bar that you're at also.
Tim, I'm sure you've got some really interesting views on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we clearly are at the beginning of this journey. You know, we've only done our first year of measuring the social value that's created across the portfolio, and we're only just starting to put those frameworks in place. And I think, you know, having that pounds and pence figure is really helpful to bring people along on that journey. But you know, we are at the start of it, and there are still, you know, significant hurdles in collecting all of that information. Being able to collect the occupier information across a an asset the size of some of Westfield's assets must be incredibly daunting. If that's what you're going to be doing and trying to understand the impact that they're having as well, it's a big task. And likewise with us, I think the difficulty in getting into some of those companies that you would expect to be forthcoming with that information have been harder than expected. I'm not going to name shame, but there are global retailers and global fashion retailers that talk about wanting to help the communities in which they work, and being very marketing heavy when it comes to being sustainable. But in reality, trying to get that information from them is incredibly difficult. And in some cases, they just blankly refuse to provide it. So I think we are at the beginning of the journey. I think it's going to change and improve. I think there will be a penny drop moment for a lot of these occupiers to provide that information. We're starting to see it with our investors. We're working through a plan at the moment of trying to do net zero plans on all of our assets. And I'm sure the more institutional firms, it's been easier to implement those things, but to try and get buy-in from investors hasn't been easy, even for something as simple as that. So yeah, I think we've got a bit of a way to go.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's actually time to move on to the questions. So the first question that we got in was from Anne Kummen. Actually, there were two questions. So the first question from her was, property management is such a low margin basis. It therefore seems likely that the cost of property management would go up if the investor or asset manager wants to drive social value. Is that true? I think needs to be added. And do you think this is fair, or why not?
I'm pretty sure this is in reference to my presentation, so I'll take this one. As we mentioned earlier, social value doesn't have to come at an expensive cost. So I don't really see why, property management couldn't be delivered at, the same price or slightly above. And if you were to, up the price slightly, you could argue that you'd likely win more contracts because you're delivering something above just the regular provision of property management.
I would just add to that, I do have some sympathy with that question. As asset managers and owners, we do rely on our property managers to be that point between us and the suppliers and the occupiers. And there's a lot of work that has to go into collecting that information. And work comes at a cost. It's time and hours that they have to spend putting those frameworks in place to collect that information. So I think I do understand that, but hopefully people can see the value in what it is that they're doing. We've had some really good support from our property managers and been really happy with the results that we've had across the entire portfolio. So I do have some sympathy with that question, just based on the time that it takes for it to be implemented.
Okay, Anne actually asked a few questions. So I'm actually going to go first to Callie Stewart, who asked a question. So he's a graduate in ESG. So depending on how many questions we get through, I can also get back to Anne again. So a question from Callie Stewart was, Tim, can you talk through the measurement process of the 3.45 million social impact value of the Broadway? Really interested to know the metrics for calculations like this.
I certainly can. I think Max is probably going to be better at actually having the detail of it because he did the majority of the work, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, very high level. We send surveys out across the occupiers and suppliers and property managers and asset managers at each of the assets. And by answering those questions, we can score them against government approved proxies that all add up to pounds and pence figures. Max, do you want to jump in and help me?
Yeah, sure. Pass over to the expert over here, apparently. Yeah, so essentially we have a range of questions that we call diagnostic questions that diagnose your social value maturity. And those range from, for example, the generic volunteering and donations through to things like governance policies. And behind most of those questions, there will be, as Tim said, an approved proxy that we've developed through our research team. So, for example, an hour of volunteering attributes to roughly £16 of social value, just based on the benefit that gives to society. And then also in that same question as well, there is sort of variance depending on where, for example, if a job is delivered, where that job is delivered. As a job in London is likely to be sort of more valuable than somewhere like, for example, Bradford, where the average wage is slightly lower. So the sort of net benefit to society is slightly lower in financial terms.
I also know the answer, but I feel as a chair I shouldn't answer the question. But it's all based around statistics. So you can look at the Office for National Statistics, for instance, about various things. So there's a real method behind it that looks at statistics and can work out what the impact is. For instance, if you hire someone who is an ex-offender by giving them a job rather than just anyone. By the way, the impacts that deliver most value are the ones that are most difficult to do, and the ones that are easiest deliver least social value, like an hour of volunteering in the soup kitchen is actually not delivering a huge amount of social value, while hiring an ex-offender is. And if you hire an ex-offender, then that person is likely to go back to prison. So there's a real saving there. Also, when they work, they are then drawing an income and not using universal credit. And also they're healthy and happier, and they won't use the health system as much. So you can work out the savings from those steps. So that's a way that it's done. So I think that's more than enough to talk about that one. So what's the next question? From Lucy Greenwood, how do we make sure social value isn't just a tick box exercise, but actually really helps people and continues to do so? Thank you very much for that question, Lucy. And who would like to go with that one?
I'm happy to give that a go. I think it comes back to the word meaningful again. It's there is a fear actually, and just to come back to Tim's point earlier, that the group actually that we're having the most problem engaging with is the retailers, believe it or not. Our supply chain, our contractors, our investors, our property managers, all completely on board. But the retailers, less so, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, they're less mature on the journey, as Tim outlined. But secondly, there's a real genuine fear of being accused of social washing or greenwashing. That if they publicise too much, maybe the small amount that they're doing, or if they overinflate what they're doing, then they will be accused of it. So we're finding more and more that actually they prefer not to come on the journey with us. They prefer to keep it in what they would, I suppose, term a safe place in their own organisation. So we've really got a piece of work to do here, I think, to take retailers on the journey. And for me, the biggest opportunity there is educating them. As Cleo said, before I went on this journey, I had no idea that by encouraging our supply chain to consider recruiting an ex-offender would be 10 times more social value than just recruiting somebody locally. And that was always a no-no. If you think about a security contract, employing somebody that's got a criminal record, that's going to look bad on us as a company. Tim employs Mighty, we employ Mighty within the shopping centre for security. But by taking them on this journey, they have realised that actually that there are people who've got a criminal record that are perfectly employable without, putting a stain on your reputation. And are beginning to come on that journey with us now as well. And that, I think, for me, is the difference between a tick box. We've done a volunteering day picking up litter on the road, which, is great. But how much social value did that really deliver versus actually a meaningful programme of getting your supply chain or your retailers doing their volunteering day in the local area, really making an impact. So the biggest thing, I think, is educating people and understanding the difference. And the second thing is getting past this fear of being accused of social washing, because I think that will be a barrier to companies going forward.
Okay, I'm trying to pick some questions. I'm trying to think what are good ones here. Andrew, can't see his name, McVick something. Sorry, it's cutting off here in my panel. So what social performance data or metrics are collected and by whom? As it's interesting to see how it could link to other environmental and economic data and metrics. So maybe that's actually one for Max to take. So what social performance data or metrics are collected and by whom?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my presentation, we have a range of sort of stakeholder groups, as we term them. So asset managers, property managers, suppliers, and occupiers. And as you can guess, the metrics or data that we collect amongst those groups varies slightly. For the occupiers, we're looking at things like employment, as Alison and Tim have alluded to recently. Things like disadvantaged employment, local employment. Through the supply chain, we might look to collect things like spend with local MSMEs or with other such firms, just to sort of capture what they're doing for the local area. For example, for the property management team, we might capture things like school visits or visits to other sort of educational facilities to provide a way into the industry. So you can kind of see how there's a slight variance within those metrics depending on the group, but essentially it'll be things that we can attribute a financial value to quantify their social value and therefore analyze it. And interestingly enough, we've actually aligned ourselves with GRES at the moment, and there is clearly some alignment there. So just to sort of confirm your point about linking to other environmental metrics, there definitely is crossover there.
Thank you. And I'd love to do this last question. Tim, Alison, I'm sure you have an opinion on this. So how do we define social value? It seems like it could cover so much and way beyond shopping centres that we've just focused on today. How far should and could social impact and value go, and where do you stop? Lucy Greenwood, thank you for your question. She actually got to it today.
I'll pass over to you two because I kind of addressed this in my presentation. So I'll pass over to you guys to define what social value means to you two.
Well, I think I'll take the second part of the question first and leave Tim to do the first one. But how far can it go and where do you stop? Well, it's endless, isn't it? It's absolutely endless. But I think the key to our success has been understanding as a business the areas you can impact. You cannot do everything. Very few businesses can do everything, cover every metric. And I think those that try probably fall into hot water fairly quickly. Really understand what you can do, what's in your remit. So for example, in the shopping centre environment, the one thing we can give really easily is space. How do we give space to organisations, grassroots charities, to give them the opportunity and a platform? And also supply chain. As I've said, utilising your supply chain to drive social value has been reasonably low hanging fruit. So understanding what you can do and starting small and growing, that would be my absolute advice. But it's I'll let Tim say what it means and what it means to us as a business.
Thanks. Yeah. So I think social value means to us it all comes down to making places better for people. And when we use examples of employing people who have previously been offenders, or doing volunteering projects, or improving the carbon emissions from your asset, it's all about delivering improvements to the way in which people's lives are affected by the impact that we're having on our communities with the investments that we make. So I think that's really what it means to us as a business. And when we're trying to improve the social value, that's what we're thinking about. We're not thinking about just increasing a number and having a bigger number next year. It's about actually making changes for the people in the places in which we invest and further afield.
And I think I'll just add, if I may, to that, Claire, that the term we use, which somebody used with me about 7 years ago and it's stuck, is that mutual flourishing. If the community that you're in is flourishing, then you as a business will flourish. So it's a vested interest in any business to be part of the community and to deliver that impact so that both flourish equally.
Okay, that's wonderful. And actually, we are now exactly at 10 o'clock, and I'd like to finish this. I know that we can keep talking, and there's still some questions that weren't answered. My apologies, but I know people always have new meetings to go to. Want to say thank you all very much for taking part, and yeah, it's been a really great session. Max, Tim, Alison, thank you all very much for all your insights, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.